For years now, pundits and industry commentators have insisted that the console wars are finally over, or at the very least, coming to an end. To back this idea up, they point to the dwindling number of true exclusives, the technical convergence of modern systems, and the argument that most people are playing the same titles regardless of the box under their television. After all, if both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X are powered by near-identical AMD architecture and release the same blockbuster games on day one, then surely the old rivalries must be a thing of the past. In fact, it's not just journalists raising this point. Even voices within the industry have added fuel to this idea. Microsoft's Phil Spencer recently remarked that Xbox is not trying to move PlayStation and Nintendo players over to Xbox anymore. For many, this sounded like the ultimate surrender, as if Xbox itself had declared an end to the decades-long hardware battle, but of course this interpretation is far too simplistic. The reality is that while the form of the conflict has changed, the console wars are far from over. They have simply evolved. So join me today as we discuss the cold hard facts as why the console wars are only just really heating up. I am Lady Decade. Hit that subscribe button. This is why in our lifetimes at least, the console wars are never going to end. Of course, when it comes to the console wars, there's really only one clear winner, and that's you, if you're not daft enough to pay full retail price anyway. Forget squabbling over plastic boxes, the real battleground is your wallet, and I can get you up to 90% off on thousands of titles, especially if you use Steam. From nearly half off the amazing Expedition 33, big money off Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong, to thousands more. There has never been a better time to play the best for less. Use my links below and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. The console wars are in a rather unique place at present. On the surface, the case for peace looks convincing. Both PlayStation and Xbox share strikingly similar specifications: custom AMD processors, RDNA-based GPUs, and 16GB of GDDR6 memory. For the average player, performance differences come down to whether a game renders at 1800 or 2160p, the kind of marginal gap only noticed in a Digital Foundry side-by-side, and with most big releases arriving simultaneously across platforms, technical convergence appears to prove that the traditional console war has run its course. Microsoft's business strategy reinforces this perception. Rather than fighting tooth and nail for exclusives to build its install base, Xbox leadership has openly embraced multi-platform publishing and subscription growth as the company's long-term model. Spencer's "will meet players wherever they are" philosophy represents a fundamental break from the old logic of locking players into hardware ecosystems. To many analysts, this statement was the final nail in the coffin. The sales numbers certainly appear to support the narrative too. As of early 2025, Sony's PlayStation 5 has sold over 75 million units, while the Xbox Series X and S combined are estimated between 28 and 33 million. That gap isn't merely large, it's widening with every passing quarter. By any conventional measure, Sony has won, and Microsoft has repositioned itself to play an entirely different game. It's no surprise then that so many voices in gaming media present the decline of exclusivity and the rise of multi-platform publishing as proof that the console wars are finished, and on the surface, they may be right. The arms race for hardware dominance no longer matters in the way it once did, yet this neat conclusion overlooks something crucial. The heart of the console wars was never really about teraflops, frame rates, or even exclusives, so let's discuss what truly matters to players' hearts. Hardware dick measuring contests have always been a part of the fun, but what has truly always mattered is identity, the deep psychological investment players make in their chosen platform, and the tribal instincts that flow from it. And those instincts have not faded, they have simply found new battlefields. So why does this behaviour still continue to persist? Well, psychological research shows that when someone invests time, money, and emotional energy into a platform, they become committed to defending that investment. This is the sunk cost effect, a well-documented bias that pushes people to justify their past choices by doubling down on them. In gaming, this manifests as what researchers call gamer identity, a phenomenon where a person's sense of self becomes closely bound to their preferred platform. It isn't just that someone plays on PlayStation, Xbox or PC, it's that they are a PlayStation gamer or an Xbox gamer, and that identity becomes part of how they view themselves. Research has shown that gamer identity becomes intertwined with self-concept, meaning that defending one's chosen platform can feel as personal as defending one's own character. The strength of this link has even been measured. Studies demonstrate that gamer identity has a significant positive correlation with game loyalty, which in plain English means the more someone identifies with a specific system, the more fiercely loyal they become to it. That loyalty doesn't just drive future purchases, it fuels arguments, evangelism, and sometimes outright hostility towards those who chose differently. Most crucially, this loyalty outlives the console's commercial lifespan. A discontinued platform may no longer matter to the industry, but for the players who tied their identity to it, it remains an extension of themselves. And this is why you still find people passionately arguing about the merits of the Sega Saturn or the Dreamcast decades after both vanished from shop shelves. Their battles are not about teraflops or sales charts. Hell, people didn't even know what the former was when those platforms came out. Their fights are about preserving identity. If the psychology of sunk costs and identity explains why the console wars begin, the digital age explains why they've grown so ferocious. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar's famous research showed that humans evolved to maintain social groups of around 150 people, which is often called Dunbar's number. For most of our history, this was perfectly sufficient. Our tribal instincts were honed in small communities where everyone knew each other. Today, those same instincts are forced to operate in environments that they were never designed for. On Twitter, Reddit, Discord or YouTube, a gamer isn't sparring with a handful of schoolyard mates, they're interacting with thousands, even millions of strangers. The brain still tries to categorize people into in-group and out-group, but at this scale the divisions become sharper and more hostile. Social media algorithms intensify the problem. They don't simply reflect what people say, they actively amplify the most emotionally charged content. As one analysis bluntly put it, social media algorithms have discovered that content triggering tribal emotions generates maximum engagement. In other words, a balanced take on PlayStation versus Xbox will sink without a trace, but if you spit venom about how the other side's games are trash, the algorithm rewards you with reach. Gaming is especially vulnerable to this cycle. Console loyalty provides obvious tribal markers, and online conflict gives communities endless ammunition to hurl at each other. We see it in review bombing campaigns aimed at sabotaging a competitor's game scores, in harassment directed at rival fan bases, and in endless waves of memes mocking anyone who dared to buy the wrong system. What once might have been schoolyard squabbles about Sonic vs Mario has become systematized, algorithmically fueled warfare, an arms race of outrage where the loudest, most hostile voices are rewarded. By this point, it is clear that gaming platforms aren't just machines, they've become markers of identity. Choosing a system doesn't simply determine what you play, but increasingly signals something about your lifestyle, your values, and even how you want others to see you. PC gaming, for instance, is often associated with technical sophistication and endless customization, while consoles are tied to convenience, shared living room experiences, or childhood nostalgia. These aren't neutral preferences, they're lifestyle statements. So let's dig into this phenomenon deeper. Perhaps one of the most infamous examples of social media markers in gaming is the so-called PC Master Race. What began as satire quickly hardened into a cultural identity. In 2008, Ben Yahtzee Croshaw coined the phrase in his zero punctuation review of The Witcher, intending to lampoon elitist PC gamers by using Nazi-inspired language for comedic exaggeration. The irony was obvious. He was ridiculing smug PC players who looked down on consoles consoles as toys, but rather than seeing it as parody, much of the community embraced the phrase unironically, adopting it as a badge of superiority. By 2025, Croshaw had grown thoroughly disillusioned with how the joke had been twisted. In one of his later reviews, he openly admitted his regret. "Fuck you, toffee-nosed PC Master Race shitheads. I wish I'd named you something else now, like the PC Gaming Dick Slurp All-Stars." His frustration highlights how satirical jabs turned into a rallying cry and how tribal identities often outgrow the intent of their creators. This identity now comes with its own hierarchy and language. Console players are regularly dismissed as peasants, a term that isn't just casual ribbing but a form of humiliation. Within this framework to the PC Master Race, simply owning a console isn't necessarily the problem, it's daring to show loyalty to it. Communities often claim playing on a console does not make you a console peasant. It is the things you say and the things you do that make you a console peasant. But still, many believe that only those who submit to PC supremacy can escape the insult, while everyone else is treated as beneath them. These labels matter because they show how gaming loyalty has transcended ordinary consumer choice. When your platform is seen as part of who you are, mocking it becomes mocking you. Derogatory terms like console peasant turn what should be harmless differences in taste into moral hierarchies, dividing people into tribes of the enlightened and the ignorant. What should have been a trivial preference about how you play has become a cultural identity war, with all the ugliness that comes with it. But if you're old enough to have been gaming for close to half a century, none of this is new whatsoever. If the modern console wars are fueled by algorithms and cultural identity, retro tribalism shows us that these battles never really end, even when the hardware does. In fact, some of the fiercest conflicts today aren't about the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X at all. They're about machines that stopped being manufactured decades ago. Take the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64. Both machines were old and out of date by the end of the 1980s, yet if you wander into the right corners of the internet, you'll find people still bickering about which had the better graphics, the richer sound chip, or the superior library. Forums such as Lemon64 are full of spirited arguments comparing technical specs, as if the 8-bit rivalry never ended. To the uninitiated, it might look like quaint nostalgia, but the passion is very real. These aren't wistful reminiscences, they're live debates where victory matters. And the same goes for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Mega Drive. For over 30 years, fans have been rehashing the blast processing debate, a slogan Sega once admitted was more marketing invention than technical feature. Even so, arguments about whether the Mega Drive's CPU advantage gave it a genuine edge continue to rumble on. In 2024, players were still locked in disputes about performance, colour palettes and libraries, proving that even when the myth has been debunked, the argument itself becomes the point, a way to preserve tribal loyalty. Then there are the true outliers like the Atari Jaguar. It was a commercial disaster, selling fewer than 250,000 units, yet it continues to attract a devoted following. The Jaguar community keeps the system alive with homebrew projects, new releases and forums where fans defend its technical merits as if it were a misunderstood gem. Similarly, systems like the Neo Geo, TurboGrafx 16 and Sega Saturn all have passionate enclaves where debates rage on not just about history but about the perceived injustice of their market's performance. And of course, there's the Dreamcast, the ultimate example of a dead console that refuses to die. As one retrospective observed, rather than fade away and simply become a forgotten footnote in the annals of gaming history, the Dreamcast still enjoys a large portion of the gaming limelight even now. Its fan base has kept servers alive, developed new homebrew titles, and staged showcase events that highlight dozens of fresh releases even in 2024. Far from fading into obscurity, the Dreamcast has become a cult phenomenon, proof that a community's loyalty can outlast a corporate abandonment. All of this demonstrates an important truth. Console wars are not bound by the life cycles of machines, they extend backwards in time, rooted in nostalgia, pride, and the desire to defend one's formative experiences. Even obsolete hardware becomes a battlefield because the real fight isn't over silicon, it's over identity, and that never becomes outdated. So what can we learn from all of this? If the console wars of the 1990s were defined by playground taunts and slick marketing campaigns, today's battleground is far uglier. Harassment has become a defining feature of gaming tribalism, with loyalty to a platform weaponized against anyone who dares to choose differently. The numbers are staggering, even if they vary by study. Research on online gaming has found harassment rates ranging anywhere from 20% to over 70%, with one study suggesting that as many as 77.75% of players have experienced it in some form. What might have once been harmless ribbing about which console was better has, in many cases, metastasized into coordinated hostility. We see this in the endless cycles of review bombing and smear campaigns. Xbox fans complain of PlayStation communities literally spending every day trashing Xbox and Starfield, while PlayStation itself is no stranger to orchestrated review bombing designed to tank rival exclusives. These aren't isolated incidents, they're organised efforts to discredit the enemy platform, carried out under the guise of grassroots outrage. The online environment supercharges this behaviour. Psychologists call it the online disinhibition effect. Me and my friends call it being a keyboard warrior, but it's when people are shielded by anonymity, invisibility and distance, they act in ways they never would face to face. In gaming communities, usernames and avatars replace accountability, creating a psychological buffer that makes it easier to hurl insults, spread misinformation or harass others with no fear of consequence. To make this worse, anonymity doesn't just enable this aggression, it amplifies it. Once a person begins throwing punches online, others quickly follow, emboldened by the lack of repercussions. The result is a self-perpetuating culture where toxic behaviour becomes normalised, and where platform loyalty is expressed not through enthusiasm for one's own games, but through abuse aimed at everyone else's. In short, the console wars of today aren't about selling hardware at all. They're about defending a tribe by attacking outsiders, and the weapons are no longer glossy adverts or cheeky slogans. They're harassment, review bombs, and algorithm-boosted bile. Essentially, the console wars have become more brutal than ever before, but is the driving force behind all this toxicity just really overzealous fanboys? For all the talk about passion and identity, there's also a hard financial reality underpinning the console wars. Loyalty translates into money. Gaming companies understand this perfectly, and they've built entire business models around sustaining and exploiting it. Subscription services are the clearest example of how companies exploit tribal loyalty. Xbox Game Pass isn't just a way to access a library of titles, it's a ready-made identity marker. Subscribers don't see themselves merely as customers, they see themselves as part of a movement, defending Game Pass as the best value in gaming against critics or against PlayStation's rival offerings. PlayStation Plus and Nintendo Switch Online operate in very much the same way, creating ecosystems that breed new allegiances. Once you've bought into one subscription and built up a digital library, you're far less likely to jump ship. The tribal boundary lines are no longer drawn by cartridges or discs, but by monthly billing cycles. The stakes here are anything but trivial. Xbox Game Pass alone now generates nearly $5 billion in annual revenue, proof of how effectively this model monetizes loyalty. But research also shows the risks. One study found that around 20% of gamers reduce their spending due to toxic environments, meaning harassment and tribal hostility directly damage revenue streams. Player retention suffers, session times shrink, and companies are forced to invest heavily in moderation to protect the very communities that drive their profits. Toxicity isn't just a cultural nuisance, it's a measurable financial liability. Investors understand this. Reports from firms like Take-Two, EA and Sony highlight community management and retention as central to long-term growth. Tribal loyalty now appears in shareholder expectations, with metrics like subscription renewals, monthly active users and churn rates treated as key indicators of financial health. When Xbox hardware sales stall but Game Pass subscriptions climb, it's that tribal attachment to a service rather than a box that reassures investors. In short, loyalty has become currency. The console wars may look childish from the outside, but the industry has every incentive to keep the fires burning. Whether it's exclusives, subscriptions, or digital storefronts, every ounce of tribal devotion can be translated into quarterly earnings, and the companies know it. After all of this, the pattern is impossible to ignore. The console wars are not relics of the 1990s, nor are they quaint playground arguments about the OG PlayStation and Nintendo 64. They are a permanent fixture of gaming culture. Loyalty isn't just a cultural phenomenon, it's a financial asset measured in churn rates, active users, and retention figures. Companies may no longer care if you buy their box, but they care very much that you stay inside their walled garden. This is why the notion that the console wars have ended is so naive. Even if Sony, Microsoft and Nintendo stopped making consoles tomorrow, the battles would rage on. They would carry on in forums, in preservation communities, in retro debates about which machine had the better sound chip or the faster CPU. Because the truth is that the console wars were never really about consoles. They were about belonging, about the tribes we form and the lengths we'll go to defend them. The manufacturers may stop making consoles, but they can never unmake the tribes, and this is why the console wars will never end. Still, don't forget that when it comes to the console wars, there's really only one clear winner, and that's you. If you're not daft enough to pay full price, of course. Forget squabbling over plastic boxes, the real battleground is your wallet, and I can get you up to 90% off thousands of titles, especially if you use Steam, from nearly half off the amazing Expedition 33, big money off Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong, to thousands more. There has never been a better time to play the best for less. Use my links down below and support my work simultaneously, or if you want to support what I do in a more personal way, access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more over on Patreon. I look forward to speaking to you all over there, and I'll see you all again soon.